Hey, what's good, people? Welcome back to the podcast. Uh, this is going to be episode number 2. Once again, I'm joined by the great and powerful Pat Sweeney. Yeah, guys, this one was a little bit of a fuck up somehow. Video got corrupted, so this one's just audio. Enjoy. Mr. Sweeney, welcome back. Hello? What do you do? Pat,
Yes, hello.
are you good?
What?
No, it's just a fucking, I don't know. You see now, you know what? I said I wasn't going to swear anymore, right? And I haven't even made it 30 seconds. And what we got to talk about, I doubt I'm going to get through the rest of this podcast without it. I really doubt it. But yeah, otherwise,
You will.
good sir, what is...
I'll be your gatekeeper, okay?
You're going to be my gatekeeper.
Yeah.
What does that...
Every time you swear, you're going to have to pay me like 1,000 rand.
1,000 rand? That's nothing. That's peanuts for you. You wipe your hole with 1,000 rand.
Yeah, but you don't. That's the problem.
Listen. Don't make fun of me and my Monopoly money, alright? It's not my fault.
Could be worse. And you're right, it's not your fault.
What could be worse, though?
You could live in Zimbabwe where you'd have to have your monopoly, take your monopoly money into the supermarket in a wheelbarrow.
Now, listen, that's okay. Look, there was a point in time when that was a reality, but the reality is now they don't even have money. So there's no need for wheelbarrows, right? There's absolutely no need for wheelbarrows. I don't know how they're doing it at the moment. I think they still on. They had bond notes at one stage, and then I think maybe 2018, 2019 they tried to bring back bond notes again, and then that all fell on its face, and they went back to the American dollar again. And I don't even know. That poor country. I really do feel for the folks there. I really do.
Yeah, it's not had the easiest history now. To be fair, has it?
Not really. And the disappointing part about Zim for me is okay, Mugabe came in and Mugabe was what Mugabe was, right? He ended up becoming a complete authoritarian. He ended up pretty much being worse than what was there before, And then the new guy, the new president or the new whatever he is, he's got a name I don't even want to attempt to pronounce. I think his first name is Robert though, so I'll call him Bobo.
Okay.
And he's come in, and everybody thought that he was going to be a completely different kind of situation in terms, in relation to Robert Mugabe, and then pretty much just ended up being much of a muchness. Not much changed.
Isn't that kind of a worldwide theme if you really look at it? So I remember the last time I was in South Africa was 4 years ago now, maybe.
Yeah, would have been
3-4 years ago, yeah, and I think that was just about the time when President Zuma had stepped down, was it, or had he stepped down? But the new guy Ramaphosa came in. I remember you being very, very, I suppose, hopeful, because as you said, the guy was a businessman with a good history of turning companies around and running big companies. So correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I ever.
In the interim, how has that worked out?
Well, look, he's definitely the lesser of all the evils at the moment in that political party, and I'm referring to the ANC, most definitely.
Yeah.
Look, I was optimistic when he came along. I think the biggest thing about that whole, that the end of Jacob Zuma being president of this country, the biggest thing was just getting to a point where it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to talk to people about what's happening in your local government when You've literally, I mean, you've got a guy stealing taxpayers' monies to go and build a 200 million rand mansion in KZN, and when he gets
with
and when he
an Olympic-sized what fire reservoir was it?
oh yeah, it was a fire pool is what he built in there, a fire pool. You know, that type of shit was that for me was like that was the hardest thing to kind of look at politics in this country and be like, oh shit, you know, like. That's supposed to be the president of this country, a dude who's currently got fucking, I don't know, he's got hundreds of charges against him, you know, hundreds of charges. And I think he just went into hospital, actually, him and his wife for COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not fucking, it's not cool. I don't wish that on anybody, but hey, karma's a bitch, eh? You fuck around for long enough and one day something will come around and bite you on the ass. And yeah, I hope he does get better. I don't want to wish ill on anybody, but yeah, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, I think.
I suppose the point I'm making is that I have a kind of a working theory here, and I know we're going off track. There's a few other things we need to hit.
Go for it. No, listen, go for it.
My working theory here is that across I suppose it's fair to say across First World, Second World, Third World, over the last 5 or 6 years at least, I've seen so many instances of where politicians have been voted in on a ticket and what they actually materialized in their term of office was nothing close to what they actually produced.
No,
finished in a way to say, oh yeah, I said we do it. And there's been some huge, absolutely huge examples here. So you've Boris Johnson in
UK, yeah.
In the UK. So he was saying that he was going to free all this money up with Brexit. He was going to get it done. He kind of let Theresa May kind of fight the good fight. He was on the opposite side of her and let her run, and then jumped in and took the party towards Brexit. And at the moment they're in a state of collapse there. There was, I'm not sure if you saw it, last week there was 8,000 trucks stuck in Dover because of COVID. And all the civil servants were saying, guys, yeah, it's because of COVID now, but in 2 weeks' time it's going to be because of Brexit. If you look at America, there's the whole Donald Trump. And whether you're pro-Donald or against Donald, everyone has to admit he's the king of spin, because a lot of what he's done some stuff, but a lot of stuff, what he said he'd do, he'd never do, and it's kind of almost misinformation in some respects. And even here in Ireland, Kyle, when you were over here, we had Bertie Ahern, who was the king of all of them. One left, right, and centre. Everyone in the street loved him, and every lawyer and every judge in the place was just waiting, licking their lips to get their hands on him. You know, I'm just kind of saying that at the moment, and like there's 3-4 examples I've chucked off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And I'm just starting to wonder, is politics? I think politics is moving away from being left, right, middle, or conservative, liberal, whatever you want to call it, and more about social media, how you can sell. It's almost like an advertising executive's job. How you sell a picture to people that they like, and then you do enough to kind of appease all the stakeholders, so big business and government and charities, as much as you can. And then towards the end of your term in office, it's more about, right, let's see how we get the spin doctors in again, and we spin how everything I've done in the last, because in America it would have been 4 years. I'm not sure how much long it is in the UK. I think it's actually 4 as well.
Yeah.
It's 4 in Ireland. It seems to be 4 in most places.
Yeah, we got 5 here.
The last 6, 8 or 12 months going, oh yeah, I said I'd do this. This is what I done, and you shout off the mountaintops about what you've done, and you stay very quiet about the big stuff that you said you'd do, or the budgets, or the tax cuts that you said that you were going to do, but the whole world knew that there was no financial kind of thought behind them. So
Look,
I'm just wondering. I think we're in a kind of a weird stage in politics. I think it's becoming less and less about conservatism and
or even policy. I mean, just plain simple
liberal,
policy,
yeah.
you know. No, I agree with you completely. I personally think, you know, politics is as an idea and how it exists in the modern world now is a complete racket, you know. I don't know. I don't know how you shift away from where we are now, though, you know, because, like, for me, for example, I think Donald Trump, as you said, everybody's got their opinions of Donald Trump. I personally, I don't particularly like the man, but you got to give him credit where he's done some very positive things for the United States. And not, you know, I've got no skin in the game there, so I don't give a shit. I think they're all fucking mad, the left and the right. I think they're as equally as fucking inept as each other. I think this pandemic, this last year, has kind of just shown, as a whole, globally, how kind of inept politicians are as a whole, you know. And I think it purely comes down to the fact of, like I was saying, I think it's a racket. I think these people realize, like, here's a question you got to ask yourself, right? Is, when have you seen an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos caliber, you know, intellectual entrepreneur, anything of that sort, going into politics? It's almost non-existent, you know, because these guys know that they've got things to do, you know. Like, I mean, Elon Musk is literally, his long-term vision is saving the human race, you know, in whatever form that comes in. But that's kind of what his main vision is in terms of getting us off of Earth to Mars and space travel further, I'm sure, at some point in time. You know, I think it really just boils down to the fact that these people that find themselves entering into politics do so maybe with good causes at the start of it. Maybe they do genuinely want to, you know, cause change in the society in which they live in. And in some way down the line, they just get caught up in the swamp that is politics, where you've got to now, you know, placate to certain people to get things done and whatnot. And I think it just ends up, no matter what intention a politician has going into office or getting into politics or whatever, I think eventually they just kind of, they submit to the system and kind of just fall in line. There are a few, though. Like, I mean, just from an American standpoint, there's a couple. One person in particular who I admire a huge amount is a lady by the name of Tulsi Gabbard. I'm sure if you're familiar with Joe Rogan, he's been on there. Well, she's been on his podcast a few times. And she's a liberal. She's a Democrat. But she doesn't, you know, toe the Democratic Party line, and she has her own ideas about things, you know. And you see what happens. I mean, she put herself forward as a presidential candidate, and in their primaries, they basically blackballed her. They didn't even give her a chance to debate or nothing. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Is you may find that there are people that have ambitions to do great things in politics, but unless you're gonna toe the party line, unless you're gonna you know, just fall in line and do what you're, you know, just show up and work your 9 to 5, if you put it that way. They're not going to do much for you. You know, there's, yeah.
I think we're not that far away in our thinking in some regards. I would say, for me, I suppose, the more you dig into it and the more I think about it, I would say is modern day politics are not fit for purpose, I would say.
No, absolutely
because
not.
If you think about where politics came from, and liberal, wherever it is, you had kind of an entity at the top in power, so a party, a coalition of parties, even things like dictators. So Franco, unfortunately, Hitler as well is one of these guys. He was the entity at the top of the government, and what he said went. And they were able to come up with some pretty good, obviously not in terms of
their ideologies and whatnot.
But some let's rephrase the good. They were able to come out with some. They were able to do stuff.
No, absolutely. Look, here's the thing, and
they were able to put policies in place and drive them through. And I think what's different now is that I think it's fair to say that we're probably in a much, much better educated world.
Absolutely.
So Ireland, you've been over here, so we nearly a degree now is like, I don't know, a GCSE or a Leaving Cert or the metric in South Africa. Everyone has one.
Yeah.
So now the push is for everyone to go and get a master's or get a doctorate, and that's because of the free or nearly free university fees.
Yeah.
But I think a kind of a side effect of that is that people now are much more comfortable thinking strategically and much more comfortable talking about politics and much more likely to start looking back through history, and that kind of brings in like the other stream of this that I think has had a big effect is how easy it is to get information. So like you've got your YouTube, Wikipedia. I know anyone can put anything up in Wikipedia, but
yeah, for the most part, it's alright.
That are good intentions, like and then you get the kind of the more kind of real social medias, the Facebooks to a degree, but now the power seems to have moved to the kind of almost the instant social media. So your Twitters, your Instagram, all those kind of things. So I think all of those things for your education, your different mindset of people, your more access to information, the fact the world is much smaller now because of the internet. As I said before on one of these podcasts, we're probably 6,000 or 7,000 miles away and we're talking to each other in real time.
Yeah.
I think they've all come together and they've probably made politics obsolete in some respect. And I think to kind of where I'm going with this is bringing it back around to the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and these guys. The reason they probably don't go in there is they realize that it's
futile.
It's all about spin. You have to be good at spin, and these guys are good at spin.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be good at spin, so you have to be good at spin to go into politics. No matter what you do, you're going to be trying to appease everyone. So it's to get anything of real substance done, you're going to either have to have a huge majority in your party and have your party all pulling the same direction, right? Or if you don't have that, there's no other way to do it. Because if you're in a coalition, you're diluting your message straight away.
Yeah.
And if politics to me is more about let's do whatever we can to get something over the line. Whereas the world that Elon Musk is living in and Jeff Bezos, I'm making an assumption now, and these guys I've never met them, I've listened to them, so I don't know what their world is really like. But corporate, where I am at the moment in corporate, the corporate company, multinational, you see the guys at the top. They go, they make their decision. They might get their team of guys underneath them to fill in the detail. They're able to enact that, and then I think they're the three reasons. There's those three reasons why I don't think we'll ever see guys of that caliber getting into politics. So they're going to have to be good at spinning, and they all are, because they wouldn't be CEOs if they weren't. Right? They're going to have to accept that when they go in there, they're not going to be able to change the world, because unless they get a huge overriding majority, and even like Donald Trump did, and he still got unbelievable flack from the media, right? And the third point of it, if you're going to do the same work in spin ways, if you're going to get nothing but a pain in the neck trying to get stuff done, why would you give up all the money that you're going to get?
No, absolutely. That's
like.
Yeah, no, that's.
Like
sorry.
Those two guys were talking about Bezos and Musk.
Yeah.
They're billionaires. They're living a life, and I know they're probably gone to a stage now where money doesn't matter because it's on figures. But still, my father once told me, he said, I'd much rather be unemployed with £1,000 in the bank rather than being unemployed with nothing in the bank. So,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
much
yeah.
easier to have it. So I don't know. There's my rant time, Kyle.
No, I think you bring up some very interesting points. I think the one thing that's definitely been forgotten in politics, and definitely from a politician's standpoint, is they're public servants. And I think as the public ourselves, I think sometimes we forget this, right? I think because, I mean, I'm talking now maybe from a South African perspective, where there is very much, I mean, there is always a kind of an overhanging thing in this country of what happens if, a race war was to start now. And I don't necessarily believe that would happen, but when you've got, high ranking politicians, and I mean, I'll name, I mean, Julius Malema being one of them, the leader of the EFF here, talking about, killing farmers, and saying, "Oh no, not yet." These types of, when you've got these types of narratives going around, it kind of leaves a huge kind of cloud hanging over everything, and you can just see it here in SA. So what I mean by when I say that these politicians have forgotten that they're public servants, right? They wouldn't be in the positions they were in if not elected, right? Now, whatever lobbying they had to do to put themselves into a position to be at the forefront, to be elected into these positions, right, is fair enough. That's what goes on behind closed doors. But once they get into these positions, you can just see there's a complete lack of connection with the people, with the constituents, with the society. They're literally elected to protect and uphold. I think there's just a disconnect. That's one of the biggest things that I find when looking at politics is, I think even like, how it works in South Africa, not in South, but in Ireland. I mean, a guy who gets into politics, generally speaking, comes from a very well-to-do family. Goes to the right schools, gets groomed in the right areas, and then is kind of picked and kind of said, okay, you can go into politics. They're kind of groomed for that position. It's very tough for a person who's lived like that, though. And I don't want to necessarily use the term, born with a silver spoon, but I mean, essentially, that's what I'm saying. Where you just have people that are just completely disconnected. They've not lived, in extreme conditions. And I don't want to say abject poverty. I don't want to talk about, they don't have to experience what it is to live in Somalia or something like that. But if you've got a person who's had no experience of ever having to struggle for money, who's never had to struggle for anything, and then you put them in charge of people's livelihoods, in charge of people's well-beings, there's a disconnect there. Why are they going to care? Why would they care about, the granny who's now been retired 20 years, who's living off of a grant or her pension or state pension or whatever the case may be? Why would they care about these people? They've never experienced anything like that before. So I think that's also another layer that kind of gets added to it as well. I personally think that I'm not trying to say all politicians. Look, there are definitely some good politicians out there, but for the vast majority, I would say that they look at it like, I mean, if you look in America, right? How is it that the likes of Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, how are these people still employed? I mean, they're over the retirement age. It's the same thing here in SA. If you look at our cabinet, right? Why is it that the average Joe, the working class, your age of retirement is 65, right? How is it that we have, I mean, our president is, I'm sure, in his 70s. Many of our cabinet members are over 65, moving into 70, or they're in their 70s. How is it that the age of retirement applies to the majority of the population, but when you're in politics, you can just carry on with it forever? And then you find the likes of these Nancy Pelosi's, these Mitch McConnells. I mean, even here in SA, career politicians, we have them. I would consider Cyril Ramaphosa to be one of them, He only recently now became president, but he's been hanging around the ANC structure for the last 3 decades. You know what I mean? He used to be I think he used to control unions at one point in time, and that's how he ended up making money. And then he got into McDonald's, and through that's how he kind of worked through his business and stuff. But I just think there's also that aspect of it as well. So I mean, I don't think there's any one particular thing, but I think there's so many. I think number one, we've made the system in itself has been designed, and probably by the people that work within the system. I'm talking about the politicians. It's been designed that they don't ever have to not be a politician. They can become I mean, look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden is now the president of the United States, right? Joe Biden was knocking about in the fucking 70s. And I'm sure, if not earlier, right? He was around during the civil rights movement in America, right? He likes to...
Yeah.
He likes to... what did I say? Don that cap as a civil rights activist, never minding the fact that the majority of stuff that his legislations that he put in place were anything but civil rights inclined. But I think you've hit it kind of on the head on your side. But I think there's just a couple more things. I think there's no incentive for politicians to do anything, because there's another aspect of it is, where's the culpability? Where's the accountability? I mean, I feel in my opinion, sorry Pat, but in my opinion, I feel if you're a politician, right, and you decide you're going to put together what it is you're going to run on, right, your platform of what you're going to run on, okay, that should almost be taken as under oath type of a thing. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you're literally saying to people, make me the leader of your society, this is what I am promising to do, that should be some sort of an oath-bound thing, especially if you're elected, and you're elected based on the policies that you run on. At the end of your term, there should be some sort of a scorecard. And if you don't get the scorecard right, if you don't come within, whatever the tolerance is of that scorecard, well, fuck you. You're a terrible politician. You shouldn't even be allowed around the thing again. So yeah, go home and sit down now. I think that's, it's maybe a bit extreme and a bit naive of me to think about it like that. But I mean, how is it that politicians just, and globally, like you say, it's everywhere. I mean, you're sitting here with
if you think about like, so just going back to like what you said about Ramaphosa, like it's more around. So if you look at Germany, one of the most technologically advanced economies in the world, the engine of EU. Recently, Angela Merkel was talking about retiring, and she was convinced not to. And she is into her 70s, and she holds the entire of Europe in her palm of her hand, and has done for the last 30 years.
Yeah,
for sure. And he must be a very clever person and a very politically astute person, because she's held the EU together through Cold War, the end of Cold War, through the 90s, through the 2000s,
Yeah.
But still, a kind of I won't call him an elderly person, because these people must have that same work ethic that the likes of Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Bezos, these guys who are quite happy and content to work 80 hours a week. So they must have that, but I think there's a little bit of it in that if you're inclined to go down that road, that politics road, right? You're not going to get enough credit in the bank until you're probably in your late 50s, 60s, 70s to kind of get enough of the political establishment willing to back you, and B, also be able to have enough political nous to actually be able to wheel and deal to get where you need to get to,
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that in it, Kyle, The one thing I would say, right, is there are a couple of beacons of light out there. So there's that young president below in New Zealand, her name, Hearn, I think is her name. But she has been really, really strong through the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, I've also seen.
And there's a similar young president above in Iceland.
Yeah.
Who I probably don't know as much about her, but seems like a very put together individual. Definitely both of those, to be fair, they deal with the media differently. And I'm not sure if that's a feature of the fact that that's the way politics work in their so I think they're more at home with media, social media, and all that. There's that senator in I can't think of her name. Young Latino, white Latino girl.
Oh, AOC. Are you talking about AOC?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Once again, seems very put together. I suppose the question is.
Oh, she's an idiot. I'm sorry, she's an idiot. I will argue with you about AOC. She's an idiot. She's an idiot. She's very much, and I will say that she's figured out social media to a T. She's figured out how to use it to her advantage. But listen, in the 21st century, anybody that comes to me with an argument about socialism is a fucking idiot. Sorry, now. This is where I will swear. But you're an idiot. If you're telling me through all the history that the human race has gone through, to look back and look at something like socialism and say, hey, listen, we might be the ones who get it right. Not understanding that every person who's ever had a socialist idea or pushed that and I mean, I'm talking here in a broad scheme of socialism, but you can break it down into the separate kind of categories of that. But I mean, if you want to look at communism, do you think Joseph Stalin didn't think, oh, I'm going to do this right? I mean, I've been watching The Man in the High Castle recently. I'm a bit late to the party, but look, to me, that's a show. It's very, very interesting to kind of to watch in the sense that you're kind of watching like the inner workings of how these organizations, the Japanese Empire and the Reich, how they would have operated behind closed doors and everything. And you see, like, for example, there's a, I don't want to ruin anything for anybody now if they've not watched the show, but guys, it's been out since 2015. If you fucking haven't at this stage, get onto it. But there's a particular point in the show where there's like a change of leadership, basically in the Nazi party, and the guy assumes power. He's busy talking to another character in the show, and he's talking about like the long-term plan and basically saying how, like, this will be the last war the Reich ever fights, and then from here we can go on and basically perfect the human race and perfect this world, etc., etc., etc. And I'm pretty sure all of these people have these ideas. I can understand why socialism on paper is appealing. The idea of spreading the wealth around, free education, free healthcare. These are things that I agree with, absolutely, right? But then where do you stop once you start going down that socialist road? I mean, look at America right now, right? And this is, sorry, I know you were just trying to make a point about AOC, but look at America right now. The AOC characters that exist in United States at this point in time have literally brought that fucking, I mean, they kind of are the bastion, held up as what it, the kind of the leader of Western society. I mean, the world kind of follows suit in everything the United States does and has done. I think that is very much shifting now, but as a result of what's occurred in like the last 2-3 years in the United States. And yeah, I'm not a fan of AOC. I think she's a fucking idiot. Who very much so, listen, I think she's one of these, and I don't think, to put her in, like, to say she's good, like to put her in the same, category as the Prime Minister of New Zealand or whoever you were talking about in Iceland. She's not that, eh? She is really not that. I think she has done exactly what I was talking about. I think she's figured out her lane in politics, and I think she's realized that if I play this lane and I stick to it, I have a career out of this. I can go on for the next 50 years and make a fuck ton of money out of politics, and I think she's done it in a very smart way, for sure. She's brought this idea across that she's for the people, whatever, while she's staying in her New York fucking penthouse, while people are out there starving in the country in which she lives in. She's not worried about it. This is why I say this disconnect. That's what I was talking about, the disconnect. And this is a young woman,
Yeah, but being honest with you, Kyle, I don't think that matters, and I'll tell you why.
Why?
Exactly because of your point. It'll never happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Socialism, communism is never going to happen.
I don't know, Pat. It scares me. It scares me.
It can't, and I'll tell you why. Because for Americans to buy into communism, there's a couple of things they have to get over. they have to get over the stigma that came from the McCarthyism and the Reds. They have to get over the stigmatism from the communists and the Cold War, right? But they also have to get over the change of mindset that it's going to take, because what essentially they're going to mean is, it means that their whole current way of life is negated.
Well, that's what they're trying. That's what they're trying to do at the moment in the United States. Sorry.
Yeah, but no, they're not.
Well, I'm not. Okay, look. Sorry. Let me maybe explain myself. Sorry, Pat. Sorry.
What they're not going to do here is they're going to have to change their mindset from the land of the free, the land of the brave, having to go out and, if you work hard enough, you'll get there, which is a great idea, okay? Changing that to, do you know what, I need to go out there and I need to work for the country. There's a very, very good film, and I'll leave you with this point, right? It's a documentary. It's on Netflix. It's called American Factory. And what it is it's set in a plant in the American Rust Belt, an old Chevrolet plant, okay?
Okay.
And the plant closed down, and it's in a town of 10 or 15,000 people, I believe, okay? So it's quite a small town, okay?
Yeah.
By their standards. I think the plant had about 5,000 or 6,000 people working in it in its heyday. The plant shut down, okay? And everyone lost their job. And there was huge unemployment and poverty there, okay? And then there was a huge news, kind of a great announcement that, you know what, this company that makes the glass for car windows, essentially, is coming in. They're going to set up the factory. The factory is going to be as big as it was before. And everyone went, yay, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
And at they held a number of town hall meetings where they were kind of telling the Americans their story. And the most poignant thing for me that came up was someone stood up and he said, I've worked in the last plant, I was there for how many years, just want to know, is this going to be a union shop? And the Chinese said no. And from that point on in the documentary, you could see it becomes less and less about how the factory goes and how the town survives and prospers, and becomes more and more about the culture clash between the Americans and the Chinese, and and it wasn't pro any side of it, being totally honest with you. It was the thing I took out about it was both ideologies are so far apart. The Americans could never understand the way the Chinese worked, and they brought some workers over to try and help the culture and to train up the guys.
Yeah.
The guys in China, the Chinese guys, could never understand why the Americans weren't so gung-ho about giving up long hours, giving up their lifestyle for the company.
Yeah.
Because the company was everything. So it's a very interesting one, Kyle, to have a look at, you know.
Yeah, look, I think the point I was trying to make, and not to say that I think, communism or anything is going to just fucking become, a global thing all of a sudden. But look, we have to face the reality that China, well, let me not say China, as I don't want to fucking talk any shit about Chinese people. Let me talk about the Communist Party of China, right? The country that currently is in charge of China. And probably will be for eternity at the rate they're going. But you have to admit that they're meddling in foreign affairs, they're meddling in foreign elections, they're meddling in just a bunch of things. I mean, the Silk Road project that they're busy they're jumping on now, where they even the Chinese money trap, where they just I think what I'm trying to say is, like, socialism as an idea, right, is dangerous because it's very easy when you sit from a position of not having much, right? Let's say you do live below the bread line. It's very easy to look at socialism as, on paper and say, oh, this is much better than what I'm experiencing now, because on paper, it's the redistribution of wealth. Everybody gets their equal share. All of these things, you end up with some of the positive benefits that comes from some socialist ideas, like free healthcare, free education. There's no doubt about that. But there's definitely, there's definitely a risk of what you can see now, especially over this last year. People are sitting at this point in time, whether they had a job, they no longer have a job. They can't find employment. They can't, they just can't fucking seem to come right at this point in time because economies have collapsed. The world is in a terrible fucking state. Now, you a young kid, no fucking prospects, you know what I mean? And I think this was kind of the point I was trying to make, was just right now what you're finding, and from what I went through, and we've spoken about this before, I spent a huge amount of time in the lockdown just immersed in what was happening in America, because obviously in May the whole George Floyd thing happened, and there was the riots, and it was captivating to watch everything that was going on. And I just ended up deep diving into that world, and it's not, I'll be honest with you, it's not as cut and dry as to say that, the Americans would never adopt the idea, they would never come around to the idea of it. The thing is, if you get enough people desperate, if enough people are living, hand to mouth, barely getting by, and you start coming around with these ideas and saying, hey, listen, how would you like, private businesses to be state-owned businesses, and then everybody gets a job, and everybody gets, and then you start building like these ideas, that seem very positive, like what happened with the movement now, this big socialist movement that's happened in America over the last kind of half a decade. It's pretty much started, and it came out of universities, that side, I think the risk being is that you're talking about the people that won't adopt these things. They're older people. You were mentioning the Cold War. Listen, how many people do you think are alive today that lived through the heyday of the Cold War? And I'm talking about, the 60s, where Kennedy was at fucking at loggerheads with Cuba, and all the way through the 20 years that preceded that, all the way up until to basically what it was, the late 80s, early 90s, that it basically stopped pretty much. How many people do you think are of that age that would resist that type of ideology? How many do you think they are at this point in time, and how much longer do you think they're around? Because the risk being is, if you've got a huge amount of people in a country, I'm just going to use the United States, for example. I can even use South Africa as an example, because, our government in itself, the ANC is a socialist party, right? The EFF, who is one of the opposition parties, is a communist party, right? And what the EFF, let me maybe use the EFF as an example, because the EFF is a very good example of it, right? The ANC has the old school, right? The ANC has the good grace in the bank, considering everything that's happened in South Africa's history, that they were at the forefront of the freedom movement, everything. They were the ones. Nelson Mandela, these guys were the ones that basically gave, the previously disadvantaged people in this country, gave them an opportunity at freedom and put them on an equal playing field on paper with everybody else, Now you've got the EFF who comes along and basically captures the minds of the youth, right? Because the youth, they don't understand, the struggle. As much as they're around it, but they don't understand it. They didn't experience it, they didn't live it. And the old politicians, when I'm talking about these 70-year-old politicians, the youth don't connect with these people. They're so far into yourself. Now you can go talk to an 18-year-old being in your mid-40s. You're living two different worlds, right? Absolutely. And this is the thing. This is more the point I was trying to make, is that these ideas are dangerous because the people that are jumping onto these ideas are the people that are going to be building the futures of our societies. And when you look at a society like America, when you look at what's happening here in South Africa, it is terrifying to think that at some point in time, you could end up with a major socialist movement running your country. I can tell you right now, the ANC hopes and prays, and this is, if you go, I don't know if you ever had, but I would recommend anybody go and read the ANC's manifesto, kind of the mission statement, what it is that they run on. They would love to be a China. I'm telling you right now, the ANC would love to make this country a China, where they control everything, everybody works for them, and they just reap the benefits, Because if you look at it, China is right now, it's the biggest economy in the world. Surpassed America, and they've done it off the back of basically making slaves out of their citizens, And that's the dangerous thing, is people will be sold on the nice things of free healthcare, free education, and they'll give their freedoms up for these things, not understanding that on the other side, you will end up with situations like, for example, in China now, where they have concentration camps. And not that they've just popped around. I bet you they've been around for fucking decades. But you're finding now you've got Muslims and Christians and whatever sitting in concentration camps in China because it's dangerous to have ideas that are opposed to what communism and socialism is. Because if people have a calling to a higher power that isn't the government, they're not going to be easily bent by the government's, whatever the government is telling them to do. You get me? You with me?
Yeah, look, I hear exactly where you're coming from, Kyle,
Yeah.
The reason why I can't ever see that happening in America, is so your point was that the people who are going to be running it in the future are the people who are impressionable now. But really,
Absolutely.
those people are never going to get close enough to power to be able to exist, to be able to affect it. Because essentially that's what they tried in the Civil War, whereas, not the Civil War, in the 70s during civil unrest, they tried to get people who had that mindset into power. And yeah, absolutely, a few of them did get in there, but the system is so set up against that they're not going to be able to affect change, even if they do get in there. And all these, where we go back to coming around full circle to the kind of the older, the 78-year-olds, the 70s, guys in their late 60s, having the reins of power, like they are operating at a very different level to the young people, in my opinion. Okay, they're clever, because you don't get to that level without being intellectually clever, but they also have the experience and the years and nows, and essentially, like John F. JFK, I think, was the youngest ever president. Okay, and impacted some real change, but we all know what happened to him. He got killed, and they're still talking about who done that, and the net effect of having that is probably one of the biggest things he's known for around the world is for the space race and for getting a man on the moon.
Yeah.
Which in terms of what good did that do to America, it was a nice paragraph in history, but it hasn't made for more equality. It hasn't made for a freer and fairer and more equitable.
Do you really? Sorry, but you really think that JFK's legacy is just going to be the space race? I mean, look, when I think of JFK, I think of his pushback against, the intelligence community in the United States at the time. I think if you follow the right conspiracy, that's exactly why he ended up dying. But that's always what I kind of think of was young blood.
Look,
Sorry.
People in America would have a different view on it. But what I grew up knowing in Ireland, it's the space race.
Yeah.
It's his one big thing, because people will always remember the one big thing you've done. They'll never remember the 10 big things they'll do. They'll pick the one big thing.
Yeah.
People like a brief comment, or remember the space race, never mind, or remember the space race and the pushback against big business and the pushback against the intelligence and all the other good things he done. So I think, and this is kind of bringing us all back to full circle, I think the system is set up to ensure that it perpetuates itself.
No, absolutely. I think, And
I think anyone who has a different mindset will always find it difficult to struggle with. And I'd say the same about Russia.
Yeah.
And I'd say the same about China. If someone wants to change the system that's in power perpetuates itself.
Well, I think it's a very different. I think it's a very different thing when we compare like authoritarian states like Russia. I know they have this facade of being a democratic society, but come on, who else is being elected? Who else is being elected or running elections in Russia? It's the same thing. China want to talk about the Democratic Republic. What are they? The Republic of China, right?
Yes.
Do you think there's real elections anywhere in China? And I think from an authoritarian state perspective, I can understand that, right? But when you're talking about a free democratic society, right? I can definitely see that there's some sort of a change. Look, there's a lot of younger people getting. I think this last year has kind of really kind of sped up the process of people becoming intellectually. Politically educated, most definitely, because everybody saw. Nobody took the likes of your mayor or your government that seriously because nobody ever saw them really doing work. But then when it came to a situation like this, where all of a sudden they can assume these powers, they can declare states of disaster, states of emergencies, and have just insane reach with their power. It's I don't know. Fuck it. I forgot my train. I lost my train of thought now on that point. And it was gonna be a cracker. It was gonna be a cracker.
I hear you.
Yeah, look, I just think in totality, look, politics as a whole, it's a rotten system. It really is a rotten system. I don't know what's better. I don't know what's better. I think number one, there's too many. I think there's too many people on this planet. I think that's one of the biggest issues as well. Is like you got to feel like Barack Obama ran on some very positive stuff when he ran for president of America, right? And there was a huge, the whole hope, and they had this whole thing of change, and all of this stuff was coming. And I mean, did Barack Obama really do anything different than anybody else that came before him? He got caught up in the swamp that was Congress. I think in a system like America, it's almost designed to exist like that because, hey, listen, if you start actually getting shit done, right, and you move society forward with legislation and whatever the case may be, at some point in time, you may find yourself with nothing to do. You get me? And I think there's some sort of a fear that kind of falls into these career politicians of, like, I mean, I don't know if you see when they pass new legislation or whatever, a lot of the times legislation that is passed is already legislation that exists, right? But what they do is they'll word it in a slightly different way, or they'll find some sort of a loophole around it that it can kind of suit whatever, whatever agenda it is that they have, I just don't know. I hate politics, but the problem being is in this day and age, especially considering the way the world is now, when you were talking about information being so readily available, I think you kind of do yourself a disservice as a person by not understanding politics, because the saying, get into politics before politics gets into you. I think this year was the moment that everybody fucking woke up and realized, oh, okay. And I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing. I would say it's a positive, because there's definitely a lot of cases where, I mean, in South Africa, for example, people not understanding the workings of politics 10 years ago to the extent that they do now allowed for, and I'm not just going to say it was the ANC. Look, I know the DA, which is another party here in SA, have been hit with, corruption issues as well. ANC, obviously in power, and they control the fucking money. They've been hit with the vast majority of them, It's fucking, I don't know. What would you consider if we had to, sit down and say, okay, how do we restructure a system to govern? Do you think, like, I personally think there would be some sort of a happy medium, right, between what currently exists and kind of going back to the old school of kind of, traditional politics, let me call it that way, of like where you would have elders, you would have people, respected members of communities that would vouch for their communities, these types of things. Like, do you think politics ever moves away from what it is now, or do you think this is the template we're stuck with? We just have to put up with, for example, in America, they have a 2-party system. That's just the way it's going to be. You have no fucking hope in hell if you're American, you want to get into politics, but you don't want to toe a Republican line, or you don't want to toe a Democratic line. You kind of sit very much in the center of, you can see the benefits of both sides of the arguments, Do you think we stuck with this? What's the hope for the world?
No.
What do you think happens?
I suppose if I was to look at it, I'm not a political or doctor or anything like that, but
Yeah.
From a kind of a normal man on the street kind of view, I think there are green shoots there, okay?
Okay.
But I think for things to be changed and for it to become that utopian world, there's three things that need to be tackled.
Okay.
So, first of all, you need to get new people involved in politics. And by that, I mean people who have that ideological fervor and willingness and want. Okay, and that can be someone like AOC, it can be someone like the Prime Minister of New Zealand, it can be someone like the Prime Minister of Iceland. Okay, or it can be an incredibly ultra successful businessman, someone who runs Amazon like Bezos or Tesla or Lobos or Stryker or one of these guys. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's and to be honest with you, I would say it's probably going to be the new younger people as opposed to someone that accomplished. I think anyone that accomplished are pretty ambitious and pretty goal orientated. So I still go back to the thing, I can't see them signing up to take a role where they don't have power to enact the change that they see needs to be done. Right?
No, I can agree with that.
The other side of it, this is really big, and this is where I'm thinking about it. I'm hopeful that if you get these people involved, so I'm holding up the Prime Minister of New Zealand because, and I'm sure things haven't gone, there's probably things she hasn't done right in the states she's made, right? But in general, like COVID has been a huge success down there, or the combating of COVID, okay? So for me, that's something to hold up, because what you have is your Prime Minister or a politician, and you have a people, a country, and the people are all bought into what she's saying.
Yeah, do you not think... Sorry, sorry, Pat, I have another question for you.
Yeah?
I have a question for you, right? Now, you've spoken about New Zealand, you've spoken about Iceland, and you've cited their leaders, right? Do you not think, though, in a situation like New Zealand, what's the population of New Zealand? 3 million?
What's it? About 4 million.
Okay, 4 million, right?
4.5 million.
Population of Iceland is like 500,000, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How fucking hard can it be to govern? And I'm just asking the question, you know, you look at a country like the United States, it's 350 million people, and you're trying to govern people, and they're literally split 50-50 down the middle. So you're never going to make everybody happy, you know.
But I agree with what your point you're making. But like if you talk about New Zealand, so they have kind of the white population there, the Caucasians, whatever you call them. But then they've a very, very multicultural population. So kind of the Pacific Islanders from Samoa, Tonga, Fiji. They're all coming there to work and going back, and those traditionally, New Zealand have had an awful lot of problems with those sectors of their community. So I think it can be done, but I think you make a good point to the fact that it worked partially because it's so small in terms of a country.
Yeah, okay? like I'll be honest with you.
I think it can be done.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're going to do it in America, it's going to be a much bigger, and you're going to need a lot more people rather than just a handful of people pulling in the same direction.
Do you know how I think? Do you know? Sorry, Pat.
Just to go back to the last one, I think the system needs to change, well, a little bit. So that's kind of the third stream of my argument. Now, I personally don't think we're ever going to see. I think you're going to see over the next 20 years, you're going to see terms like political, conservative and Democrat and liberal and conservative and kind of socialist and communist peter out. I think the terms are going to peter out. I think that politics is going to become some kind of an amalgamation of all, because there's never going to be one size fits all. So the Americans, I think, will always lean towards their ideals of land free and the actual, if you work hard enough, you'll do better, whereas kind of more Eastern Europe would probably tend a little bit more towards, you know, state needs to take care of us better. But I think when I say the system needs to change, I think the system needs to change so that it doesn't self-propagate itself. So that if the general feeling of the populace is that they need change, the system itself, so the odds are not stacked against that feeling. Mm-hmm. So I don't, like, realistically, I don't see things changing in the short term, but I think longer term, there is a possibility there. Yeah. But I think the odds are stacked against them anyway because the current systems are self-propagating.
Yeah.
So there's my big, long-winded thing about politics, which we didn't think we were.
I know. We discussed completely other different things. We're pushing an hour now, and and we've just done politics. I do have one more question for you, though, right? Just one more question. On politics, right? Do you not think? I mean, if it's good enough for a president to, I mean, let's take the president of America. They can only serve 2 terms, right? 8 years maximum. Doesn't matter if it's consecutive. You serve your first term, you go away, you come back 4 years after that, and you go and you run for election again. How is it that rule can apply to a president, but it doesn't apply to the rest of politics? And this is now the reason I ask you this question is because you're talking about the self-propagating system. It just keeps itself fucking going, right? But the only reason I feel that it keeps itself going is because America, again, you've had the Mitch McConnells, you've had the Nancy Pelosi's, you've had the Joe Bidens, the Clintons, you've had these people be in politics for extended periods of time. Do you not think if there was ever a situation set up, like if you wanted to be, even if you're not talking, your ambition is not to be, the president of a country, but maybe you want to be, I don't know, a local politician, a municipal ward here in SA, or a mayor, or, in the US you've got your governors, that type of thing. In South Africa we have premiers. Do you not think the way to kind of end that self-propagating system is to say, okay, you can only serve 2 terms as a politician. You can get into politics by all means, right? And if you're an adult, you can get in. If you want to take your shot at politics, by all means, you can get in. But if you are elected into office, you can only hold that specific office. Yeah, you see, there'll be a loophole there. But you know what I mean? You understand what I'm saying? Like, if you're elected into a position, maybe you can only hold that office once, instead of having, a governor. Well, no, that doesn't work either. They're only allowed to serve terms.
It's a very interesting topic you brought up. I don't think it'll work, and I'll tell you why. Ooh. Because if you have a system like that, right, mm-hmm. you are going to have let's suppose I want to run for president, or run for Senate, or run for Congress. Okay? Then I'm going to have to make a decision straight up, right? Yeah. I'm going to have to say, right, that I am happy not being a president. I'm happy not being a senator.
Okay.
And I'm just happy to be a congressman.
Yeah, maybe. Sorry, Pat. Maybe I kind of fucked it up with the way I was wording it, but I was more kind of trying to say, okay, if you want to go into politics, let's say, right, and you go into local politics at a very at a grassroots level of politics, right? That position, maybe you're only ever elected. You can only hold that position once, right? From that point on, you either push on and push up, or you fuck off. I think maybe not so much that. I don't think it maybe holds as much value at like a local government level, right? But definitely in your state legislators, for example. I mean, when you talk about, like, let's use America again as an example, right? But like the Senate or Congress, right? There are people who become congressmen or congresswomen, and they'll do it for 40 years. They'll make a career out of it, right? That to me is more what I'm talking about, right? That's wrong. To me, I don't understand how it is you can become you go and you say, okay, I'm now a senator or whatever, and you can just be a senator for fucking as long as you get reelected. And I think that's a huge problem. I think that's a huge problem, for example, now where America sits, is because you got somebody around, right? Let's say you're getting to that age now. You've just spent 20 years or 30 years in politics, right? You want to kind of get out, you just want the easy life, right? So you're not going to push, radical agendas within Congress, for example, within the Senate, because you've now carved out your niche. You've figured out your lane in life. You are a congressman or a congresswoman or a senator, and this is all you have to do. You're here. You've hit the gravy train. You earn a very decent salary. This is what you can do for the next 40 years. Whereas if you fucking said to people, okay, you know what? If you want to become a member of Congress, okay, you can serve a maximum of 2 terms, and they 4-year terms each or whatever, right? You have it run like a presidential cycle, okay? I can guarantee you, I don't want to even say guarantee because I don't know, but I would think logically speaking, that somebody given a very limited amount of time to get things done would probably achieve more than somebody who just knows, oh, if I get into Congress, I could possibly sit there for the next 40 years. There's no urgency to do anything,
Yes, another point you're taking. But there is, so I'll address the. So first of all, there's an issue with that system. So I'll address that first. Then I'll come back, right?
Okay.
And I'll talk about exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you have someone who, and this is actually reflected in corporate world as well, right? So if you come in and you start at a job and you're a job, and then you progress to say if you're a manager and you become a senior manager, and then a director, and move the way up. Okay.
Yeah.
What that breeds is it means that you've got a steady line of people for the higher echelons who are really well put together, right? They're really well put together. They're experienced. They've made their mistakes at a lower level where at the time it seems huge, but you know what, in the great scheme of things, it's not as critical as at the higher levels, okay? Mm-hmm. And that is one problem with that system, because you only ever have 2 terms, and then you got to move. And to be fair, like a job like the President of America, you need to have experience. You need to have built relationships.
Do you really?
Across the world.
Do you really?
You do.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, you do.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would look. Maybe I'm jaded in my viewpoint on that one, right? But looking at the caliber of politician we have here in South Africa, no, you don't.
Yeah,
having looked. I mean, listen.
I'm saying if you want to have a really well-functioning.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Country, you have to have that level.
Yeah, you got to have pipeline. There has to be pipeline, I suppose.
Yeah. So that's kind of the one for me there. That if you limit people to 2 terms in any one role, right, you're going to end up with people who A, are only just after getting to grips with the role, B, have built up enough of, by the time they've built up enough of contacts and kudos and learned how to get things done, they're finished, they're out the door, okay?
Yeah.
And the other kind of point you were saying about, so the congressman who's there for 50 years, right?
Yeah.
The system is inherently set up to take care of those guys, not in a nice way, really. Okay, so anyone who is working at that level has to be so in touch with their voters, right?
Okay.
Because they have to go back every 4 years, and they have to be able to say, I've done so much for this area or this state, that the new guy coming up with all these lovely thoughts and these radical thoughts, that you have to be able to stand side by side and say, hey, look what I've done. I've delivered over the last 10 terms, 5 terms, however many terms.
Yeah.
So I don't think that anyone who's there for 40 years, right? Let's say 40. I'm picking a number, right? For 40 years, they have worked for their state, and their state have said, yeah, I've seen what you've done, and I'm happy with what you've done. You're working well for the state. And that's kind of the second point I have on this,
I get what you're saying, right? I understand exactly what you're saying. It's just knowing. I mean, I don't. Maybe. Like I say, it's me and my jaded, point of view, having watched, our local politics here in SA just be an absolute shit show.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a little bit jaded from that perspective, but I don't know. For me, I just think something's got to change at some point in time. I would much prefer it though to be a kind of a general consensus change, as opposed to there being some major upheaval. Like I do. I'll be honest with you. I sit and I watch him. Sorry, Pat.
Kyle,
Yeah.
That's why I have some hope for the coming of the future,
Yeah.
Because people coming out of college now are very different in their mindset to people my age, even people. So I'm mid-40s, but even people mid-30s, they're very different way of thinking.
Oh yeah, Pat. Look, I'll agree with you. I'll agree with you. Yeah.
Definitely see a change, and maybe that's where the change comes from. That it's those people are going to enact that change.
So you're putting our faith in millennials. We're putting faith in millennials to push society forward.
I'll tell you a story about millennials and then snowflakes and all these.
Technically speaking, I am one. So yeah.
Yeah, but
don't defend, please.
Worse about you, So don't be too annoyed by it, right? So there was a guy started in the company I work with, an engineer straight out of college.
Yeah.
Trained him up on a process, a very difficult process. A process that traditionally, if you became expert in the process, you would follow down the road of engineers, senior engineers, senior staff, and principal.
Yeah.
Obviously, the higher you go, the less people made it to the higher echelons of that progression route. Okay, but you could, by the time you normally what you see is you go up maybe 3 or 4 levels, so maybe the staff level, and that then you have a cadre of really experienced engineers who stay at that level and don't progress forward, but they're expert in their process. Okay?
Yes.
So I trained this guy up on this process. It's probably one of the most technical processes there. Okay, and I was talking to this guy saying, yeah, you know what? No, world's your oyster here. You can decide what you want to do. You'll always be able to come back to the place. You'll always get a job because you're expert in this process.
Yeah.
Okay. So he went into his manager and said that when they were talking about progression, and his manager says, well, what do you want to do? And your manager said, well, I'm here 12 months, so I have another 12-month contract, and I need to be getting a step up now at that stage. And if I don't, I'll go elsewhere, and I'll get it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so he got his contract. Then there was a questionnaire came out. They were assessing the competencies of their team, and one of the questions was, in your process, you rate yourself 1 to 5. So he rated himself a 3, which was right. So competent,
Yeah.
on the way to becoming more competent. And then rate your interest in it, and he said 0. He doesn't like it. He's only doing it to get forward. So I like the thought process, because traditionally, so I'm in there 8 years. I'm now heading for principal engineer, but I spent 5 6 years getting to the 3rd level.
Yeah.
So there's a change in their thinking. And maybe like when I grew up in the 90s, 80s, 90s, late 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, and there was a little bit of doffing the cap. Yeah, thanks for the job. Yeah, I'll work hard for the job. I'll be the company man.
Yeah.
Nowadays, people coming out of college, and maybe this is only just coming out of college in Ireland, okay? They're more, I won't say put together, but they know what they want, and they're not afraid to go with it, and they're not afraid to ask for it, and they're not afraid to fight for it. And what they want can be very naive. Sometimes what they want may not be the wrong thing, but they're saying, yeah, that's what I want, I'm going to go for it. And you know what, if it's wrong for me at that stage, then I'll go and I'll do something else. So I'm seeing a change in mindset of younger folks, and I'm hoping that reflects itself,
Yeah, no, I definitely, look, I can agree with you on that one. I mean, even just thinking about, my generation, maybe it was kind of like the first, I don't even know, because I don't want to talk for a whole group of people, maybe talk for myself, but I don't know. from what I've seen, and this could also be a societal thing. Like I may be talking about experiences here, what I've seen in SA, but I can tell you one thing. Like for example, here in SA, there's a real kind of sense of entitlement through youth, right? And I don't know exactly where it comes from. I'm sure it has to come from the home. So I'm sure there's probably parents out there telling their kids they can do whatever it is that they want. They're entitled to whatever they want or whatever. I don't know, but I suppose it's probably like anything. There's the real kind of the good to it, and there's the real bad to it. But I hope I hope you're ultimately right. I really do. I think.
Yeah.
Look, I think it would be fantastic. For us to get to a point as a society. Let's be real. We're kind of moving a little bit more and more towards kind of like I don't want to say a globalist society, because people get scared. They start thinking of, one world order and all of this, a one world government and all of that type of shit. But we kind of have to admit that we have a global society now. I mean, you can get in contact with anybody anywhere on the planet almost. You know what I mean? People can go almost anywhere on the planet now. Well, not right now, but when things aren't fucking messed up with pandemics and shit like that, like you have the ability to do that. And I just like my hope, for my sons, when they maybe reach my age, is that they exist in a world where politics will be run and maybe more based on the idea of best argument wins, not opposed, not really to the, like, in the way that you see it now, where it's like politics or your ideas win by you bashing the other person, trying to make the other person seem as big a piece of shit as possible so that their ideas fall down, whether or not they have a good idea or not, Like this has been one of the biggest things that's kind of annoyed me looking at, and it's not just politics, it's all of society, is when people get in front of each other and they're met with resistance to their ideas. It's far easier to turn around and make the other person something, abominable that you wouldn't even want to deal with, you know what I mean? As opposed to dealing with their, because then you don't have to deal with their idea. You don't have to deal with their idea if the person you're dealing with is a piece of shit. That's my hope, is that we can move past the shit of the fucking circus that has been America for the last 5 years, where it's just literally, I mean, you look at the fucking, this, for me, having watched the presidential election race this time around, to me, I couldn't understand why the fuck you would even do it. Like, what was the point of those two old bastards fucking debating each other? Because all it was
prestige, power,
ego.
keeping up the appearances more than anything else. It's always been done that way. It's an institution, so they have to play the game.
Yeah, listen, I think, look, in my opinion about that whole thing, I think the Democrats have pulled off the heist of our lifetime, to be honest with you. I really do. I don't want to get too much into that. We can leave for another one, but yeah. Right, moving on. Jesus, a bit fucking heavy. We've just done an hour and 20 minutes on politics. I don't know if we got anywhere, but yeah, that was just the idea. Just I hope that we can as a world kind of just move past this fucking everything having to be conflict, as opposed to just sitting down and letting cooler heads prevail. Let the best idea win. And I think that's kind of only how the world kind of progresses and becomes better, is if that ideology is adopted.
You see, the problem, Kyle, is that everyone thinks their idea is the best idea, and they get so invested in the idea that they become defensive. So there's a kind of a mantra in the place where I work, where it says assume positive intent, and keep an open, be curious, keep an open mind. I scoffed at it first, but I found that definitely makes you more open.
No, absolutely, absolutely. In, like, for me, like, if I was looking at somebody who wants to become an elected official, right, somebody running for whatever, for whatever office, right, if this person is so married to their ideology and their ideas that they cannot, right, see that the person on the other side of the conversation has a point that is better than theirs, right? That's not really, that isn't the type of person you want to be fucking doing anything. Because that person's got an ego beyond what they're trying to do, an ego that's self-serving, an ego that's, can be destructive.
That's one explanation, and you're absolutely correct. But the other side of it is that when you start talking about these kind of decisions and these ideas of how a race, how a country, how a society is going to move forward.
Yeah.
It's the discussions start getting clouded by what happened before, and in some cases justifiably what happened before. I'm thinking like the way the racism in the United States. I'm thinking about the way World War II and in Germany, and how the Jewish people were treated there.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty certain that you could go over to the Arabia, around that area, and you'd have certain. So you see it with the Palestinians.
Yeah.
So these guys have had some pretty tough times. So that colours things, and you see it with the Northern Ireland in Ireland. You'll see it. That's what happens. That colours things, guys. So look, in total, I'm hopeful. I may be totally looking through a set of glasses that are completely rose tinted, but I think there are things that are changed, but I don't think it'll ever be perfect anyway.
Yeah, no. Look, I have faith in people. That's one thing. I do appreciate people. You you kind of have to. You're surrounded by 8 billion of them. You can't fucking you can't hate people. It's all we see really. No. And I do have faith. Like I said, I think there's definitely got to be some sort of a clear out of the old. And look, that'll happen naturally in any case. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just,
And what I would say is, I said, I don't foresee if I came back in 100 years, I would expect to see things being done very differently. Don't know what that's going to look like, and I'd hope that it would look better than what it is at the moment. But I don't think it will be done the same way. So definitely, I think you'll have a different spin being put on things.
Oh yeah. I think at that point, look, in 100 years, I think we're probably going to be very different. I mean, even physically to what we are today. I think. I think we're probably not even. You would come back and it would be unrecognizable what humans become in 100 years' time. You'll probably be like, oh shit, this is what aliens were. No, it's an interesting idea, but yeah. Another thing. So yeah. That was fucking cool. Thank you. I appreciate your listening to my nonsense, because as well, I'm not the most politically minded. It's just I fucking worry about these things from time to time.
Yeah.
One thing.
Can I need to shoot away for a short while